Whose children are these?
Mine.
Don't lie to me.
I said they're mine.
Then why does that boy have my face? Answer me, Nneka.
You lost the right to ask me anything 5 years ago.
You disappeared carrying my child?
No.
What?
I disappeared carrying twins.
If you're watching this for the first time, welcome to a maid's AfroK-Stories, where love hits different, secrets cut deeper, and the truth always finds its way back. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a drop. Now let's get into it. The Lagos Creative Exchange was the kind of event that smelled like ambition, warm air thick with perfume, fabric, and the low hum of conversation that meant money was moving somewhere nearby. Nneka Obi stood at the back of her booth arranging the last piece on the rack, a cobalt blue evening gown with structured shoulders that she had cut, pinned, and sewn herself over 3 consecutive sleepless nights. She had learned a long time ago that exhaustion was just discipline wearing a different face. She stepped back and looked at her collection. 12 pieces, each one a quiet argument that Nigerian fashion belonged on the same floor as any European house in the world. She was 31 now, sharper than she had been at 25 when she had first arrived in Seoul, full of ideas and a scholarship letter and a heart that did not yet know what it was capable of surviving. Her natural hair was pulled into a high puff today, silver earrings catching the light, her skin the rich deep brown of a woman who had stopped apologizing for taking up space. She was not the girl who had fled Korea 5 years ago shaking and alone, and 2 months pregnant with twins she had not yet told anyone about. She was someone harder now. Someone who had built a life by hand. Mommy! She turned. Her son Kolade was tugging at the hem of her blazer. His face tilted up toward her with the particular intensity that meant something had captured his attention, and he needed her to witness it immediately. He was 4 years old and already exhausting in the best possible way. Curious and persistent and so completely himself that it sometimes made her chest ache with something that had no name. What is it, baby? That man is staring at us. Nneka straightened slowly and followed her son's gaze across the crowded exhibition floor. She stopped breathing. Kang Min-Jae stood 40 feet away in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire booth setup, flanked by 2 assistants who were visibly trying to get his attention and failing completely. He was not looking at them. He was not looking at anything in the room except her son. His face had gone completely still, the kind of stillness that happened when the body understood something before the mind had finished processing it. He had changed in 5 years. The softness she remembered around his eyes had been replaced by something carved and careful. His jaw was sharper. His posture was the posture of a man who had learned to carry authority like armor. But his eyes, dark, intense, laser-focused, those were exactly the same. And right now those eyes were locked on Kolade with an expression that looked like a man watching his own ghost walk toward him. Mommy, Kolade said again, still pulling her hem. Why is that man staring at me like he knows me? Nneka's hand found her son's shoulder and she pressed gently, instinctively pulling him closer. Her daughter Kamsi appeared a second later from behind the rack, holding the stuffed bear she carried everywhere and yawning with the full theatrical commitment only a 4-year-old could manage. Kamsi had Nneka's face, her round cheeks and wide dark eyes and the small stubborn set of her mouth. Kolade had his father's. Min-Jae's eyes moved from the boy to Nneka. Across the crowd and the noise and 5 years of silence, the moment between them landed like a blade dropping. He started walking toward her. Nneka did not run. She had promised herself years ago that she would never run again. She pressed both children gently toward her business partner Dami, who was standing nearby, and said quietly, "Watch them for a minute," and stepped around the booth to meet him before he could reach the children. They stopped 2 feet apart. Close enough to speak quietly. Close enough that she could see the muscle working in his jaw. Nneka. Just her name. The way he said it, like the word had been sitting in his chest for years and was only now being released, made something dangerous move through her ribcage. She crushed it. "Mr. Kang," she said. "What are you doing in Lagos?" "Investment tour." His voice was steady but his eyes kept cutting past her to where the children were. "The Lagos Tech Fashion Corridor. My company has interests here." "Then enjoy your tour." She turned to walk back. "That boy." His voice stopped her. "He has my eyes, Nneka." She did not turn around immediately. She took 1 breath. 2. Then she turned with her face composed into something smooth and said, "Children look like lots of people. Don't." His voice dropped low and something in it fractured slightly, not breaking but cracking at the edge. Don't do that to me. I have a mirror. I know my own face. He paused. How old are they? Silence. How old? 4, she said. She watched him calculate it. Watched the math land on him. Watched his face do something complicated and painful before the armor came back down over it. I need to speak with you privately, he said. Tonight. I don't think that's a good idea. I'm not asking. I know you're not. She met his eyes without flinching. But you should know that you stopped being someone whose requests I felt obligated to honor 5 years ago. So. She tilted her head slightly. I'll decide. I'll let you know. She walked back to her booth, and she did not let herself shake until she was behind the rack where no one could see her. She sent him a location that evening. A quiet hotel bar, neutral ground, somewhere she could leave quickly if she needed to. She arranged for Dammy to take the children back to the house. She sat at a corner table with a glass of water she did not drink and she waited. He arrived exactly on time. He always had. He sat across from her and for a long moment neither of them spoke and the silence between them was dense with everything that had not been said for 5 years. You ran away pregnant, he said finally. I didn't run. Her voice was quiet and even. I was removed. He frowned. What does that mean? It means I woke up one morning and found that my student visa had been flagged for a documentation issue that I had not known about. My phone line was dead. My building's front office told me I had 72 hours to vacate my room. I tried to call you. It went straight to a number not in service message. She paused. I went to your office building. I was turned away at the gate. I was told you had given instructions not to receive personal visitors. Something moved through his face. That is not. I never gave that instruction. I know that now, she said. I didn't know it then. You could have found another way. You could have. I was 25, Min-Jae. Her voice was still even but something underneath it pulsed like a wound that had healed over but not healed through. I was in a foreign country. I had no money, my accommodation was being pulled, my visa was compromised, I was 8 weeks pregnant and I was terrified. I had no one. Your number didn't work. Your building wouldn't let me in. Your family. She stopped. What about my family? She looked at him. Your grandmother's assistant came to see me. The change on his face was immediate and subtle and she caught it. A flicker of something that was almost recognition before it went carefully blank. Mr. Seo, he said slowly. He told me very clearly that the Kang family had no interest in a relationship between you and a foreign student. He told me that if I attempted to contact you further I would face legal complications with my visa. She kept her voice level. He also gave me an envelope. Min-Jae's jaw tightened. Money. Enough to get home. Enough for the first few months. She exhaled. I threw it across the room. He left it on the floor. And then I had no money and 2 babies growing inside me and eventually I picked it up. Because they needed to eat. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than before. This one had weight to it. Gravity. You stopped looking after 2 weeks, she said. It was not an accusation, simply a fact she had carried for 5 years, and she needed to put it down somewhere. 2 weeks and then nothing. I thought, she looked away briefly. I thought that meant you had chosen. That you had decided we weren't worth the complication. My number didn't stop working, he said. His voice was controlled but underneath it something was burning. My emails, I sent you emails for a month, Nneka. Everyone bounced back. Your student account was deactivated. I hired someone to find your home address in Nigeria, and they came back with nothing. She frowned slightly. My family's address isn't hard to find. The records they accessed showed a different name. Different village. He leaned forward slightly. Someone fed them false information. And when I tried to report to authorities that I believed someone I knew had been forced to leave the country, I was told that her departure had been entirely voluntary. That she had signed documentation confirming it. Nneka went still. I never signed anything, she said. I know that now, he said. And the echo of her own words coming back at her made something shift in the space between them. He pulled out his phone, sent something to her number. A contact, a name. This is the investigator I worked with at the time. His records still exist. Everything I'm telling you is documented. She looked at the name on her screen. She looked up at him. Mr. Seo, she said. Your grandmother's assistant. Is now vice chairman of Kang Industries. His voice was flat. He has been for 3 years. The implications of that landed on her slowly and then all at once the way heavy things did. First the outer edge arriving, then the full weight crushing through. She sat back. Her mind was moving quickly through everything she had believed for 5 years, and finding the architecture of it rotten. Full of false walls and planted doors. He didn't just want to separate us, she said slowly. No, Min-Jae said. He didn't. The investigation that Min-Jae had been quietly running for the past 3 weeks, since a source inside the company had flagged something irregular about documents from 7 years ago, had started to unspool something much larger than a family's disapproval of a girlfriend. He had brought 2 of his most trusted people onto it quietly. What they had found was not a protective grandmother embarrassed by her grandson's romantic choices. What they had found was architecture, deliberate and patient and built over years. Daesung Seo had recognized, before Min-Jae had, what Min-Jae was planning. At 26, Min-Jae had been preparing to step back from his family's company. He had told only one person, his grandmother, who he trusted completely. He had been in love with Nneka for 8 months. He had been thinking about a life that looked different from the one mapped out for him. He had told his grandmother that Nneka was pregnant. He had told her he intended to take responsibility. Within 3 weeks Nneka was gone. Within 6 months Min-Jae, heartbroken, convinced he had been abandoned, furious and closed off in a way he had not been before, had thrown himself into the company, had become exactly the cold, relentless heir that the Kang board had always needed, had risen to the position of chairman 2 years later when his grandmother's health declined. Seo had manufactured his pain and profited from it. The investigator had found something else too. Something that Min-Jae had not yet shared with Nneka, because he was still processing what it meant. His grandmother, in the last 6 months of her life, had been making inquiries. She had hired her own private person to find Nneka. The trail went cold 3 times, but on the 4th attempt there had been a breakthrough. A confirmed address in Lagos, a photo of 2 small children with a woman who matched the description. His grandmother had died before she could act on it, but she had amended her will 11 months before her death. I need to ask you something, he said. And I need you to be completely honest with me. I've been more honest with you in the last 20 minutes than I was in the entire last year we were together, she said. So, Kolade, is there anything? He paused, choosing words carefully. Is there anything I should know about his health? The slight hesitation before her answer told him everything even before she spoke. Why do you ask that? Because my grandmother had a congenital heart condition that was not diagnosed until she was in her 30s. It's hereditary and it skips generations with no pattern. He kept his voice steady. If Kolade is my son, he needs surgery, she said. The words came out quieter than everything else she had said, and in the quiet of them was 5 years of fear carried alone. He was diagnosed 8 months ago. A valve issue. It's manageable right now, but in 18 months if he doesn't have the procedure. She stopped. Her jaw tightened. I have been working every hour available to me since the diagnosis. I have sold 2 collections. I have taken every order, every commission. It's still not enough. Min-Jae did not say anything for a moment. Why didn't you contact me? He asked. Not as an accusation. As a genuine question from a man trying to understand the architecture of 5 years of silence. Because I buried my pride every single day trying to keep them alive, she said. Because the one time I tried to reach you 3 years ago, I got as far as finding your company's public contact address, and then I thought, if I contact him and he turns us away, what does that do to my children? What does it do to me? She exhaled. I could not afford to break. They needed me whole. He nodded slowly. Something was happening behind his eyes that she could not quite read. Something that had moved past the coldness he had walked in wearing and into something that was older and rawer. They will have the surgery, he said. I will cover every cost. That is not a negotiation. I am not a charity case. He is my son, Nneka. His voice broke slightly on the word, just slightly, just at the edge, but it was there and she heard it and it did something unwelcome to her resolve. He is my son and he needed medical care and I didn't know. That ends now. She looked at him across the table and for a moment she saw him as he had been at 27, the version of him she had fallen for, the one before everything, the one who used to bring her ramen at midnight when she was studying and sit on her dorm room floor reading because he just wanted to be in the same room as her. She looked at that version and then she looked at the man sitting across from her now, harder, quieter, carved by years of a grief she had not known he was carrying, and she made the only decision available to a mother. Fine, she said. But I set the terms. She did not set many terms as it turned out because 3 days later everything changed. Min-Jae's investigator called him at 6 a.m. on a Thursday with something in his voice that was carefully controlled in the way that meant it shouldn't have been. The will had been fully decoded. Kang Min-Jae's grandmother, matriarch of the family, the woman who had built the original Kang Industries from a 2-room office in Busan, had left the controlling shares of the company not to Min-Jae, not to the board, not to any of the named family beneficiaries. She had left them to 2 minors to be held in trust until their 25th birthdays, identified in the document only by their birth mother's name, and a sealed DNA confirmation clause that the trust administrator was required to execute. The 2 minors were Kolade and Kang Min-Jae. Min-Jae sat with this information for 47 minutes before he called anyone. Then he called Nneka. She listened without interrupting, which was how he knew she was truly shocked. She was not someone who typically let silence do her work for her. Your grandmother left the company shares to the twins, she said finally. The controlling shares. Not the majority 38%, but strategically they're the deciding votes on major decisions. Whoever holds proxy for those shares until the children come of age controls the direction of the company, Nneka finished. She paused. And right now who knows about this? Seo knows. His voice was quiet. He was her personal assistant for 20 years. He processed all her documentation. He would have seen this amended at some point. Another pause, longer this time. Min-Jae, she said. 3 days ago someone followed me from the school pickup. He was already moving. Pack what you need for yourself and the children. You're coming to the house I'm staying in here in Lagos. Tonight. I am not. Nneka. His voice was not cold. It was something more frightening than cold. It was controlled fear. The fear of a man who understood exactly what Daesung Seo was capable of and was calculating the distance between that capability and 2 4-year-old children, who did not yet know that they were the most valuable people in a billion-dollar war. She packed. The house Min-Jae had taken in Lagos was the kind of place that announced its security quietly. Cameras that did not blink, staff who moved with purpose, gates that closed with the soft finality of something that meant it. Nneka stood in the entrance hall on the first night, and felt the particular discomfort of a woman who had spent 5 years building her independence being absorbed into someone else's infrastructure. She set the children up in adjoining rooms. She checked the locks twice. She stood in the hallway outside their doors for a long moment before she went back downstairs. Min-Jae was in the sitting room going through documents on his laptop. He looked up when she came in. They're settled, he asked. Kamsi fell asleep in 40 seconds. Kolade is staging a negotiation about whether he can keep the hall light on. She sat in the chair across from him and tucked her feet under her. Old habit. She caught herself doing it and put her feet back on the floor. Something almost like a smile moved across his face, gone before it fully arrived. He negotiates, he said. Constantly. He once spent 25 minutes arguing that brushing teeth twice a day was statistically unnecessary. She paused. He won. I had to look up the actual dental guidelines to counter him. This time the almost smile became something real, brief and unguarded. And it was so completely the smile she remembered from 8 years ago that it landed in her chest like something thrown hard. She looked away. How serious is Seo's reach? She asked. Back to business. Safer there. Serious enough that I'm not underestimating him. Min-Jae turned the laptop to show her a diagram. An org chart with names and connection lines. He built his network over 20 years. He has loyalty inside the company and outside it. The tail you spotted wasn't random. He would have been tracking you since the moment I arrived in Lagos. He paused. He knew who I was going to the exhibition to meet. You told someone? No. But my travel itinerary was accessed internally 2 days before I flew. His voice was calm but his eyes were not. He's been ahead of me. That stops now. How? By being unpredictable. He closed the laptop. And by getting to the trust administrator before he does. There's a law firm in Seoul that holds the sealed documents. If we get there first with DNA confirmation, the twins inherit their proxy protection under the will. And Seo loses his path to full control. He nodded. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. They spent 5 years asking where their father was, she said. Not to wound him. Just because it was true and it existed and it lived in her and she needed somewhere to put it. Every birthday. Every school form that asked for a father's name. Kolade used to tell people his father was a pilot who lived very far away. I don't know where he got that. I never told him that. Min-Jae said nothing for a moment. When he spoke his voice was low and careful, like a man handling something fragile that he was not sure he deserved to touch. I spent 5 years asking why you left me, he said. The room held that between them for a long time. I found an account, he said finally. About 2 years after you disappeared. Anonymous. I couldn't trace it back to anyone. Every few months money moved into it and then moved out to a Lagos address. I assumed it was a family member helping you. He looked at her steadily. It wasn't, was it? She was very still. You knew where I was, she said slowly. I knew a city. Not an address. Not a name. He held her gaze. I set up the account. I kept it funded. I told myself it was the only thing I had left that I could do. He paused. I also told myself you hated me. That you had left willingly. That the money was the only apology available to a man whose family had made you disappear. Another pause. I was wrong about all of it. But I kept sending. Nneka looked at him and the careful wall she had been maintaining since the exhibition. Since before that. Since the moment she had seen his face across the crowd. Developed a crack that she could feel but could not stop. You should have come, she said, and her voice was not angry. It was tired. You should have gotten on a plane and come. I know, he said simply. No defense. No explanation. Just the acknowledgement sitting there clean and honest between them. Before she could respond, her phone lit up with a message from Dammy. She read it and went cold. Someone had broken into her studio that evening. Nothing taken. But her design files, the external drive where she kept 5 years of work, every pattern, every collection had been wiped. It was not about the files. It was a message. She showed Min-Jae the screen without a word. She watched his jaw set and his eyes go to the place they went when he was making calculations that other people couldn't see. He's escalating, Min-Jae said. We move up the Seoul timeline. We leave in 3 days. You're asking me to take my children to Korea. I'm asking you to take my children somewhere I can actually protect them. He held her gaze. I know what that country costs you. I know what it means to walk back in. I am asking anyway. She thought about Kolade arguing about the hall light upstairs. She thought about Kamsi's bear with the missing button eye that she had been meaning to replace for 6 months. She thought about a drive that had been wiped not because anyone wanted her designs, but because someone wanted her to know they could reach her anywhere. 3 days, she said. Seoul received them on a gray morning with low cloud and the smell of rain that hadn't arrived yet. The children pressed their faces against the car window the entire drive from the airport, narrating everything they saw in the overlapping bilingual chaos that happened when 2 4-year-olds were excited. Kolade in English and Kamsi in a mix that had recently started incorporating Yoruba, and somehow 3 Korean words she had learned from a cartoon. Min-Jae sat beside Nneka in the back seat and watched his children with an expression on his face that she recognized with a pang she couldn't name. It was the expression of someone receiving something they had not known they were starving for. The trust administrator's office was in Gangnam, a clean glass building that smelled like legal certainty. The meeting took 4 hours. At the end of it, the sealed documents had been opened, the DNA clause had been initiated, samples collected, expedited processing confirmed, and the proxy protection for the twins had been filed as a pending action. Seo would know within 24 hours. Min-Jae's phone rang on the way out. He looked at the screen, showed it to Nneka without comment. Seo. He answered it on speaker. You should have stayed in Lagos, Chairman. Seo's voice was warm and measured and utterly dangerous. This is going to become very complicated for you. It became complicated 5 years ago when you had my children's mother removed from the country, Min-Jae said. I've been patient about that. I'm done being patient. A small pause. The press will find the story very interesting. African woman. Secret children. It writes itself. Let me tell you what I'm going to do, Min-Jae said. His voice had dropped into a register that Nneka had not heard before. Not cold exactly, but absolute. The voice of a man who had calculated everything and found the equation finished. I'm going to hold a press conference tomorrow. And I'm going to tell them everything. Not your version. Mine. Ours. He glanced at Nneka. All of it. The line went quiet. You won't. Watch me, Min-Jae said. And ended the call. The press conference was at 10 the next morning. The room was full before 9:30. Reporters, cameras, the particular crackling energy of a media event that people knew was going to produce something. Rumors had moved fast. The Kang chairman, an unscheduled announcement, no advance details. The speculation was already running. Seo made his move at 9:55. A statement was released to 3 major outlets simultaneously. Anonymous source, confirmed by a named company insider, claiming that the chairman was being manipulated by a foreign national, using illegitimate children to access the Kang estate. The language was clinical and devastating and crafted to land before Min-Jae could speak. Nneka was standing at the back of the room when the notifications started appearing on journalists' phones. She watched them look up. Watched them look at her. Felt the moment shift. She lifted her chin. Min-Jae walked to the podium. Thank you for coming, he said. I'll keep this brief. He looked out at the room with the steadiness of a man who had made his decision and would not be moved from it. There has been a statement released this morning describing the woman standing at the back of this room in terms I am not going to repeat. I want to address it directly. He paused. She is not what that statement says she is. He looked at Nneka across the room. She is not a mistress, he said. She is not a manipulator. She is not a foreign national leveraging my name. Another pause. The room was completely silent. She is my wife. Nneka went very still. Or she will be, he said, and something broke through the controlled surface of his face. Something real and unguarded and completely without armor. If she'll have me. After everything. He held her gaze from across the room. And those children in the car outside with their security detail, arguing about whether they can have ice cream before 10 a.m. A sound moved through the room. Almost laughter. Almost something more than that. They are the best thing that has ever happened to me, he said. And I am done letting anyone use them as a weapon. He stepped back from the podium. The room erupted. Nneka stood at the back with her heart doing something entirely undignified, and she thought about everything she had carried for 5 years. The fear and the pride and the loneliness and the relentless grinding work of building something from nothing for 2 people who had needed her to stay standing. She thought about all of it. And then she walked toward him. The board moved against Seo within 48 hours. The evidence Min-Jae's investigators had compiled over 3 weeks landed in the hands of the company's legal team and the authorities simultaneously. The passport blacklisting. The forged departure documentation. The false records fed to Min-Jae's search team. The anonymous payment to a woman in Seoul who had once been Nneka's closest friend. A woman named Jisoo who had sat in Nneka's dorm room the night she found out she was pregnant, who had held her hand and told her everything would be fine, and who had been on Seo's payroll for the 4 months prior. Nneka received the file on Jisoo on a Tuesday afternoon. She sat with it for a long time. The particular grief of a betrayal by someone you had loved. Not romantic love but the fierce particular love of the friendship you build when you are far from home, and she was the person you chose to be your home instead. That grief did not have a quick shape. It settled in and she let it. She did not contact Jisoo. There was nothing to say that the evidence hadn't already said. Kolade's surgery was scheduled for 6 weeks after their arrival in Seoul. The procedure took 4 hours. Min-Jae sat beside Nneka in the waiting room the entire time, not talking much, occasionally bringing her tea she drank without tasting, present in the steady undemonstrative way that she remembered from the early days of knowing him, before love had become complicated, when he had simply been the person who showed up. When the surgeon came out and said the procedure had gone perfectly and that the boy was asking for his mother and also for ice cream, Nneka put her face in her hands for 30 seconds. Just 30. Then she straightened and went to find her son. Min-Jae was behind her. He stayed behind her. He was learning, she thought, the particular discipline of not rushing a woman who had spent 5 years building her own pace. The letter came on a Friday. A courier delivered it to the house, formal sealed, marked with the insignia of the law firm that had managed Kang Sun-hee's estate. It was addressed to Nneka by name. She opened it alone in the garden while the children ran circuits around the fountain with the boundless specific energy of 4-year-olds, who had been told to stay out of the koi pond, and had interpreted this as a challenge rather than an instruction. The handwriting inside was shaky but deliberate. The letter of a woman who had chosen her words carefully because she knew she might not have time to choose again. I destroyed your happiness once. I told myself I was protecting my grandson. I told myself you were a complication he would thank me for removing. I was wrong. I knew I was wrong before the year was out, and by then I could not find you. I looked. I am sorry it was not enough. Forgive an old woman if you can. Protect the twins. Love my grandson back if there is anything left in you to give. And one more thing. One truth I should have told him years ago and did not. Min-Jae is not my real grandson. He was adopted at birth. His biological family is not Kang. I raised him as mine and he is mine in every way that matters. But the shares were always meant to go to blood. I changed my will because his blood, whatever it is, made those children. And those children are the continuation I choose. The rest he will have to decide for himself. Nneka sat with the letter in her lap for a long time. Then she got up and went inside to find Min-Jae. He was in the kitchen attempting, with limited success, to explain to Kamsi why the fish crackers were a snack and not a dinner. Kamsi was unconvinced and mounting a detailed rebuttal. Kolade was watching with the detached strategic interest of someone observing a negotiation he intended to learn from. Nneka stood in the doorway and looked at all three of them. She crossed the room and held the letter out to him. He read it standing at the kitchen counter while Kamsi continued her fish cracker argument in the background and Kolade started edging toward the cracker bag with the careful patience of a child who had identified an opportunity. Min-Jae read to the end. He read it again. He put it down on the counter and was quiet for a long moment. She loved you, Nneka said simply. Whatever she did wrong, she loved you. That part was real. He nodded once. Something moved through him that was not quite grief and not quite release but somewhere in the country between them. Did you know? She asked. That you were adopted? No, he said. She nodded. She moved to stand beside him. Not in front of him, not behind, beside, the way that meant she was not trying to lead him through this but she was not leaving him alone in it either. It doesn't change anything, he said finally. About who I am. No, she agreed. It doesn't. Kamsi had successfully redirected Kolade's cracker raid into a coordinated operation, and both children were now on the counter surrounded by fish crackers looking extremely pleased with themselves. Min-Jae looked at them. His children. The most important fact of the last several weeks, and it was becoming increasingly clear, the most important fact of his life. He looked at Nneka. I meant what I said at the press conference, he said. Both things. All of it. I know, she said. That's not a yes, he pointed out. It's not a no either. She looked at him sideways and the edge of something warm moved through her expression. Guarded still, careful still, but present. Real. Ask me again in 6 months. When we've had time to actually know each other again. When the lawyers are done and the board has settled and Kolade has fully recovered and I've slept for more than 5 consecutive hours. 6 months, he repeated. 6 months, she confirmed. He nodded. And then, because he was Min-Jae and had always been better at presence than words, he simply stayed where he was, beside her at the counter, watching their children conduct fish cracker negotiations, and did not push for more than what she had given. It was enough. For now it was enough. Outside, Seoul moved in its usual way, loud and fast and completely indifferent to the private rearrangements of individual lives. Inside, something quieter was happening. Something that had been broken 5 years ago by greed and fear and the particular cruelty of people who mistake power for wisdom was being rebuilt, slowly, carefully, by 2 people who had survived the breaking and come out harder and more honest and, against all reasonable probability, still capable of choosing each other. The twins finished the fish crackers and demanded to know what was for dinner. Life as it always did continued. And that is where we leave Nneka and Min-Jae, and those two brilliant, unstoppable twins for today. If this story had you locked in from that first line, share it with someone who needs a new obsession, and drop a comment telling me which moment hit you hardest. Don't forget to subscribe to AfroK-Stories, and hit the bell so you never miss what comes next. We'll see you in the next one.